Chapter 8. The Sweat. He had thought he knew what heat was. In this place, he breathed heat. Sweat rolled in rivulets down his bare chest. They were near the adobe where he'd met Joe yesterday, inside a structure made of some planks forming a cone-shaped roof over a shallow pit. A hole at the peak allowed smoke to escape. Not even the banked fire made much sound, nearly complete silence. He wasn't sure now how long he'd been here. Now and then he turned to look at Bill, who seemed to be taking it better than himself. The odor of burning sage nearly overwhelmed him. Bill handed him the water skin, and Nathaniel drank again. Panamint Joe was there as well, but he didn't stay inside all the time. He'd stay for a while, observing, then he'd go out again for some unknown purpose. Bill lay out flat on the ground and signed for Nathaniel to do the same. When he did, it felt a degree or two cooler. He found he could breathe more easily there on the ground. He must have dozed off. He awoke to find Bill pulling his arm. "You come outside now." Nathaniel happily complied. A thought had crossed his mind. He might die in that place. He crawled through the canvas flap covering the entrance to the round enclosure. When he stood up, he nearly fainted from dizziness. Bill pulled him away, half supporting him. Nathaniel closed his eyes, feeling the comparatively cool night air. Then he experienced a terrific shock as cold water flooded over his head. He gasped, wanting to scream, and opened his eyes to see Panamint Joe holding the bucket. Joe studied him. "You go back inside now," he said. "Ask ancestors for guidance." Nathaniel wanted to argue that he didn't even know who his ancestors were, but he had no breath for speech. Bill poured a bucket of cold water over himself, then guided Nathaniel back toward the sweat lodge. Nathaniel wondered what he was doing here, why he had come in the first place. He was about to turn around and argue, but Bill shoved him back through the entrance. He was surprised to see Joe already tending the fire, a sharp stench of burning sage in the air. He drank more water and lay down again. Joe gave him a piece of cactus to suck on. It was even more bitter than the kind Bill had given him back in the desert, but he sucked it dry. He threw the leftover in the fire. Then Joe handed him another piece. It was a strange kind of cactus, one he'd never seen before. "What do you call this?" he asked. "Peyote," Bill said. After a while, he no longer minded the heat. He found fascination in the colors of the flames. There seemed to be pictures in the fire, visions of other times and places. The whisper of the crackling fire contained voices heard long ago. Staring at the flames, he saw Annabelle's face as he had last seen her in Baltimore. "Don't worry," she was saying. "You always worry too much. Tomorrow morning, when he goes to his office, I'll pack a small bag, send the maid home, and meet you at the railroad. We will go west, and neither of us will have to see him again. He cannot refuse a divorce because I know too much. I'll threaten to reveal his smuggling activities and the fraudulent insurance claims. Milton understands the business of insurance fraud better than he does importing. I hope he will understand blackmail, because that's what I will do, without remorse. Not for money, though. I don't care about that. I am only extorting my own freedom. We will both be free, Nathaniel, tomorrow morning." Then, when she was about to say something else, a rattlesnake with 4 legs and wings leaped from the flames. It seized Annabelle in its jaws and carried her off. Nathaniel screamed. The next thing he knew, he was outside with cold water being poured over him again. When he came to himself, he looked at Panamint Joe.
I am my own ancestor, he said. I will own this lie because it is the truth. It was I who killed him.
He slept at the adobe and arose at dawn. Colors were brighter and deeper. He strolled through Bullfrog and on toward Rhyolite, admiring every spot of color, fluorescent poppies in window boxes, the scarlets and emeralds of painted signs above store windows. Everything seemed changed. There were not so many people on the street as usual. It was as if the town was holding its breath. Then he realized how quiet it all was and remembered it was Sunday. Omar and Kathy would be getting married today. He wished he could attend, but that was out. Sally would be there. Annabelle might go as well. He mustn't be seen with them. Feeling at a loss, he stopped at the Newton Grill for breakfast. It was the only place open on Golden Street, except for saloons. He briefly considered having a beer, but something about his experience of the night before had opened his eyes. He had a feeling alcohol might close them again. A Mexican girl waited on him, and he asked for ham and eggs.
This town's pretty quiet on Sunday, he observed.
Yes, sir. Makes up for Saturday night. Most folks are either in church or hungover.
Maybe I should go to church. Anything interesting happened last night? I wasn't around.
She shrugged.
There was a shooting, all right. Couple of barachones, drunks. They got excited about a card game or something and fired off about 6 rounds each. Good thing they were drunk. Their aim was bad. One of them got hit in the leg. I guess he's down at the miners' hospital with a hangover.
And here I thought Rhyolite was a peaceful town.
Mostly it is. But then there was that Senor Kramer who got killed last week.
Nathaniel felt a chill.
Did you happen to know him?
The air was filled with the smell of cooking bacon.
He come in here sometimes. He didn't tip good. Sometimes he came in with Senor Collins. I liked him better.
Collins? Who's that?
Oh, he's that mining fellow from up at the big mine. I guess him and Kramer did a lot of business.
Collins. I think I met him once or twice at the 66 Club. I wonder what sort of business they were doing.
She shrugged, breaking eggs on the hot griddle.
Mining business, I expect.
Nathaniel caught a glimpse of himself in a mirror across the room. He saw that he had changed, along with the town. For a moment, he thought he was looking at a stranger. After breakfast, he wandered the street, feeling at loose ends and still with that sense of seeing with new vision. He felt relaxed, at peace with himself. He would have to be in court tomorrow. This might be his final day of freedom. By chance, he found himself 2 blocks from the Presbyterian church, just as the newlyweds were leaving. He stepped into a doorway to watch from a distance. There was a lot of shouting and laughing from Madame Lamar's girls, and much rice tossed at the happy couple. Nathaniel couldn't make out individual faces at that distance, but he thought he spotted Sally. Omar and Kathy climbed into the back of a hired automobile to drive the short distance to the railroad station. Nathaniel supposed they would take a train directly to Denver.
Quite a party.
It was Edmund J. Fish who had come up without Nathaniel noticing. Nathaniel nodded, smiling.
None of the regular churchgoers, of course,
Fish said.
Just a few of the miners and Madame Lamar's girls. All the proper citizens are boycotting the church, at least for this week. That's why I didn't go to the wedding myself. Wouldn't want to alienate some of my clients. Well, I must say, Miss Kathy made out better than poor Isabella. Isabella? Who's that? Haven't you heard that story?
Fish grinned.
You feel like going for a walk? I'll show her to you.
The wedding car at that moment went roaring past, doing at least 20 miles per hour. Omar, in the back seat with his massive arm around his bride, spotted Nathaniel and waved. Nathaniel gave him a thumbs up.
I wouldn't mind a walk,
he said. The two men strolled down the middle of the dusty street, headed in the direction of the red light district. Stray dogs and burros were seeking shade, though it wasn't yet the heat of afternoon. It didn't take long to reach the jail, located on the edge of the district.
A too familiar spot,
Nathaniel remarked. But Fish led him some distance away, behind the building to a secluded place with a small white wooden cross in the middle. A few wilted flowers lay next to it.
Isabella,
Fish said. Nathaniel stared, wondering at the meaning of this lone grave so near the center of town.
She was a lady of the night,
Fish explained.
A miner fell madly in love with her, as miners will, as men will. One night, on this very spot, he proposed marriage to her. Perhaps he was drunk, I wouldn't know. Anyway, she either didn't want to give up her profession, or she plain didn't like the fellow. She refused him. Right there and then, he pulled a gun and shot her dead. That's terrible. How could a man do that to someone he loved?
Fish shrugged.
At any rate, he went to prison. But the proper ladies of Rhyolite wouldn't allow poor Isabella to be buried in the town graveyard. The stewards of the miners' union and the IWW tried to reason with them, but they would have none of it. So the miners declared a holiday and buried her here, right in town, on the very spot where she was murdered. I expect she'll be remembered longer than those resting in the graveyard. Quite a story.
Fish flashed his grin again.
They say some nights you can see her strolling about here, looking for her killer. Maybe to ask him why. I wouldn't know. I don't come here at night. Not often, anyway. Let's go get a beer.
At the 66 Club, they pulled chairs away from a table and sat down. Nathaniel still felt that odd reluctance to taste alcohol. Instead, he had a glass of ice water. He drank half of it down and asked for more. After the previous night, he felt he could never drink enough water.
I don't play cards on Sunday,
Fish said,
but there's always checkers. Care for a game?
He set up a board and they began to play, neither with much enthusiasm. The day was getting hot again. Nathaniel felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to look up.
I just wanted to shake your hand,
the man said.
Huh? What for?
Nathaniel recognized Collins, the mining engineer.
For shooting that bastard. I hear you don't deny doing it.
Nathaniel shook his hand briefly.
No, I guess I don't. Why don't you sit a spell?
Collins sat down and glanced at Nathaniel's glass of water. The bartender had put in a twist of lemon as well as ice cubes.
I see you're having one of those gin drinks. A cool one for a hot day. Can I buy you another? No thanks. Though I appreciate the offer. I guess I've had about enough for this time of day.
He glanced at Fish, who looked away without expression.
I thought you were in some kind of business with Milton. I mean, Mr. Kramer. Or so I heard.
Collins snorted.
You could call it business. Monkey business. Kramer was trying to get me to invest in a new mine. He figured if I bought some stock, people would pay attention. What with me being an engineer and all, he could sell a lot more stock. The price would go up and we could both get rich quick. At least that was the idea. Sounds like it didn't pan out. Literally. You must know that expression comes from gold panning. Oh, Kramer had a legal gold mine, all right, or at least a claim for one.
Collins paused and reached into an inner vest pocket. He withdrew a folded document and spread it out on the table. It was elaborately printed with green engraving and some gold highlights. A stock certificate.
The Golden Giant Mine,
Nathaniel read.
10 shares. How much would that be worth, if I might ask? Not a plug nickel. Use it to light your cigar or to wipe your butt. Kramer sold me 100 shares at $10 a share. He was going to have it listed at the exchange. As soon as it got around town that I was an investor, it would double in price. We'd make a killing. So what happened?
Fish asked.
I bought those shares on the strength of a report by his prospector and some crystals he brought in. I should have known better, being in the business as long as I have. I'd never even met this prospector before, but it looked good on the map, 20 miles out, not far from where some other strikes have been made. Fortunately, I insisted on going to see the strike myself before I'd let Kramer list the stock. He tried to talk me out of it. Too far out in the desert, too many snakes, no water, and so on. But I made up my mind to go anyway. I hired my own guide, got some equipment ready, and it took me about a week, enough time for Kramer to get out there himself and do some salting. What do you mean? I made it out to the claim all right, just where the map said it was. I found the marker cairn, and I found lots of rock crystals scattered around with free gold in it. Beautiful stuff, maybe worth $1,000 a ton. What's wrong with that?
Nathaniel asked.
What's wrong is that I'm a mining engineer. I know something about geology. It had me fooled for maybe 10 minutes. Then I started digging. There was none of that crystal in the ground. I don't know where Kramer got all that ore or how he managed to haul it out there, but it didn't come from there. That claim was salted. Golden Giant, my ass. Sorry to hear it,
Nathaniel said. Fish was watching both of them thoughtfully.
Kramer tried to pass the whole thing off as some kind of joke. He promised to pay back the money. I told him I'd sue if he didn't. I have a feeling he was getting ready to leave town when you shot the bastard. I just want to say thanks. He needed shooting.
Nathaniel nodded.
He probably would have left town and changed his name and taken the money with him. Pleasant talking to you, gents. I need to get back up to the mine in a bit for a small task.
Collins rose, tipped his hat, and walked off, leaving the stock certificate behind. Nathaniel and Fish resumed their checker game. Nathaniel lost twice in a row. Fish leaned back and finished his beer.
That's the kind of story that worries me,
he said.
Worries you how?
Fish glanced over his shoulder.
It wouldn't do to repeat anything I say here, strictly between the two of us, you understand? What I mean to say is, the city has issued a lot of bonds to pay for that new school. It will likely take years to pay them off, even with current revenues. I get worried when I hear about salted mining claims. It makes me wonder how many other mines maybe have been salted.
Nathaniel grinned.
The hellfish. Nobody could have salted that big mine outside of town. They wouldn't get away with it. There's more than one way to salt a claim. You can throw gold ore on the ground, or you can just say there's ore and make everybody believe it. Last week, I had a talk with the bookkeeper. The mine hasn't been shipping as much ore as they predicted. Now you're getting me worried,
Nathaniel said.
The real estate business is slowing down,
Fish said. He scooped up the checkers and dropped them back in their box.